Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in and joining us as we continue to live broadcast our tribute to Leon Fleisher. Today we are completing the seventh day of mourning the passing of Mr. Fleisher, our remembrance of him as a musician, teacher, mentor, friend. We hope very much that staying with us helped you as much as it helped us to also take a look forward to carrying his legacy into the future together with the generations of musicians to come. This tribute is made possible by an extraordinary solidarity effort of Mr. Fleischer's students, who put their love and their work together in honor of their noble teacher. It was an experience of a lifetime for me to be a part of a near 100 people group chat on Messenger, with so much love, cooperation, and richness which Mr. Fleischer's students share with each other. They bring their musical offerings, they speak about their mentor, they help us all pay homage to this incredible man, and to pledge our own dedication and to carry on his legacy of the human and artistic values which he taught and upheld himself. We appreciate your patience if the artists may experience challenges with connecting. We'll do our best to bring the beauty of each presentation to you in the fullest. And now I would like to invite to our virtual stage Sonya Lifschitz. She will be joining us from Australia. She's 14 hours ahead of us. And she had to hijack her own office at the university in order to be able to connect with us. We're looking very much forward to Sonya's presentation. Welcome to our program, and thank you so much for this enormous effort it took you to be able to be here with us.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me and for giving me this opportunity to join my voice and add my voice to the voices of so many over this past week. And a huge, heartfelt thank you to you for bringing us together and connecting us in such a way. I think I speak not just for myself, but for many others throughout this week and for all the students, that those daily broadcasts have just been such a big part of this healing journey as we all grapple individually and collectively with such a humongous loss. And especially during this time of global pandemic when so many of us are yearning for human connection and human exchange. And of course, under normal circumstances, there would be so many tributes possible to mark this extraordinary life and this extraordinary human being. But unfortunately, where we are today in the world, that's not possible. So it makes those broadcasts and those connections so much more special. So huge thank you to you for the incredible job you're doing with this.
Thank you. It's been a journey of a lifetime for me to be with so many students of Leon Fleischer, and just an enormous amount of love and joy, and of course the sadness, which you all bring, and so much wisdom. Would you like to share maybe some memories or some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think it's once in a lifetime when you come across a human being, an artist, a musician of that immensity, that magnitude, that intensity, integrity, depth, just the life force and that force field that pulled around him when he walked into the room, into that 413 studio was so huge and so powerful and so palpable that without him having to do anything, just him being himself, that you really couldn't help but feel yourself in the presence of a great man and of greatness. And of course, he came into all of our lives during our most formative, impressionable years. And because of that, made such an indelible mark and imprint on all of us. I think with Fleischer, there's always a bit of a before and after moment in one's life, a kind of BC and AD, before Fleischer and after Fleischer. Uh, because I know that, for example, in my life, just spending 4 years in that studio on the fourth floor has completely transformed my life and has just been one of the richest, most cherished, most precious gifts in my life, certainly, and I think in everybody's lives who's spoken on this broadcast. And I'm sorry if this is a little bit sacrilegious, the AD and BC and those kind of analogies, but he really was a kind of god, like certainly a musical god for all of us during those times. You know, he was so many things. He was a great musical linguist. His capacity to take a bunch of just black dots on the page and unpack them and distill them in most minute, precise detail in terms of the syntaxes, the grammar, the punctuation, the sentence structure, the verbs, the nouns of the music, and to really distill it and communicate it in terms of the most pristine, crystalline, distilled, irrefutably logical musical language. And that's such a gift that he gave us through that. I mean, we all know his phenomenal capacity to shape and organize musical material, that sense of melodic inflection he talked to us about, and that one can hear in his playing, that sense of grouping and subgrouping of the musical phrases, of the notes. And I know all of us have those endless curves in our scores with the groupings, the 4-1-2-3, 4-1-2-3, or 2-3-4-1, 2-3-4-1, in order to not fall into the pool of gravity and to keep going across the bar lines. And of course, his notion of defying gravity has become almost mythologized by now. That notion that he always talked about music being governed by physical forces, and his extraordinary demonstrations of that when he talked about the centrifugal force, and he would demonstrate with that amazing left hand of his that turning the corner of the phrase without losing any of that velocity and intensity that would leave us all with our jaws on the floor. I mean, of course, there were so many moments of jaws on the floor and minds being blown open every week, every hour. So many people spoke so beautifully already about his phenomenal way with rhythm and his beautiful aphorisms, of course, play as late as possible without being late, long notes long, short notes long, short notes short. I remember another beautiful analogy of rowing a boat, that he would talk about that impetus of pulling the oars and the propulsion that happens after that, and the gradual loss of momentum, and then waiting for that sweet spot when you have to pull again to propel the music forward. So another thing, he was an incredible poet. I think people also have spoken so much and so beautifully about his way with words and his capacity to shape his sentences, to shape his pauses, to shape his silences, exactly the way he shaped his musical phrases, and his incredible capacity to take the most ineffable, inexplicable, intangible concepts and put them in the most beautiful, succinct, vivid language. That was such a gift of his. He was also a philosopher, and I think I would even say a seer. The way he would talk about the metaphysical, the cosmic, the infinity, the eternity, that sense of cosmic patience he would talk about when we played those long, endless, slow movements of late Beethoven and late Schubert sonatas. I was particularly fond of his holy trinity of the three big R's. One was redemption, the other one was relinquishment. And I have to admit, I cannot for the life of me remember the third R. I've been trying so hard to remember what the third R is. I've been in touch with a few of my studio peers, friends from back then, and if anybody remembers what the third R is, please let me know, because I've been losing sleep over it. Uh, many people already have spoken about his wonderful and sometimes wicked sense of humor and his dry wit. And I remember one episode when I brought a piece to him for the second time after some period of time, and I played it for him, and he started giving me some advice and some suggestions. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Fleisher, but I remember last time I played this for you, you said something quite the opposite." And he paused, lifted his big black glasses over his eyebrows, looked at me with these black piercing eyes of his, and said, "My dear, life is nothing but adjustments." And that's something I've really inherited from him, and I've recycled that phrase so many times in so many situations with my students and different life situations. Life is nothing but adjustments. But of course, he also had the ability to absolutely uplift you and make you elated. I think all of us can remember sitting there playing, and he would put his big left paw on the top of your shoulder and the back of your neck and hold you completely still and just say, "Get your feeling, put your feelings out of it, take your feelings out of it, just stay still and listen." And he would sing along, and he would conduct along with his right hand, and you would really enter some kind of a trance where anything almost felt possible. And then eventually there would come that sweet golden moment when he would say, "That's it, beautiful," and then he'd throw himself back in the chair and say, "Wow." And then the silence, and you would just feel like you were soaring for the rest of the day. So some of those beautiful, beautiful memories. And Einaf spoke very beautifully and eloquently yesterday about it, and everybody has spoken in their own different way about it. One of his greatest gifts to us was, of course, that sense of independence and giving us tools to be able to teach ourselves. I think that notion that Einav mentioned, that the pianist is really three people, that person A, person B, and person C, with the person A being your inner ear and the capacity and the ability to imagine exactly what you want to hear, and person B being the actual physical body playing the instrument, and person C being this neutral observer in the audience whose job it is to reflect what the person B is matching person A's intention. And he would often say that pianist really needs to be like a doctor who's able to diagnose a problem and find the right prescription to fix that problem. And I think that sense of that feedback between the three people, person A, B, and C, is what gave us those incredible tools, the toolkit, and that musical literacy and the musical fluency to be able to open any score, any piece of music, and really see and understand and distill those underlining musical structures and have the means and the capacity to realize them in sound. And that's certainly maybe the greatest gift that I got from him. So maybe this is a good time for me to share my little musical offering. I'm so sorry that I can't do it live. As Anna said, it's nearly 1:30 a.m. in the morning here in Sydney, in Australia, and I don't think my neighbors would be very happy to be hearing piano playing right now. So it's just a little short piece from an online live stream concert that I did a couple of weeks ago. And it's perhaps a bit of an unusual selection in this context. We've heard so much Brahms and Beethoven and Schubert. This is actually a piece by George Crumb, Fleischer's contemporary and another great American musician. It's a piece from his Makrokosmos, book 1. It's called the Dream Images, Life, Death, Music. And the first instruction in the score says, musingly, like a gentle caress of a faintly remembered music. And it's so beautiful, and it's almost like something that would come out of Fleischer's mouth. I also commissioned a series of poems to go with each of the 12 pieces in the Makrokosmos, which I'll read for you in a second. But the reason it felt special to share this particular piece is that for me, it really encapsulates so much of what Fleisher is for me, that sense of the eternal, the transcendent, the timeless, the infinite, and also a sense of something earthly and embodied, the memory of which we will all carry with us to the end of our lives. So I'll read you the little poem, and then perhaps we can listen to the clip of the piece. Gently, the night descends on the velvet wings of a bat. The stars reclaim their kingdom, and the moon ascends her throne. This is a time for dreamers and all that longs for rest.
Thank you for sharing this wonderful composition and your incredibly profound playing of it.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. It's a stunningly beautiful piece, and it just felt like a really beautiful elegy for this occasion.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. I'm so happy that you brought this to all this incredible repertoire, which we have been hearing for the whole week.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
I- is there any more memories? You're speaking so beautifully. Is there any more you would like to share with us? And I know you had another poem you wanted to recite, but I'll leave
That's
it up to you
right.
when
That's right.
you'd like to move to
Thank
that.
you, Anna. I guess perhaps two more little things that I will share. And one was when I first actually heard Fleischer play, and when I first became aware of him, I was 15, or maybe just turned 16. He came to Melbourne in Australia to play with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, played the Ravel left hand. And I came quite innocently, thought, oh, okay, American pianist playing, I should go and hear it. Went to the concert, I think, with my mom. And I remember, my goodness, he started playing that first solo cadenza with the left hand, and it just blew my mind open. I've never heard or seen anything like it. It really completely redefined for me what piano playing was, what music was, what performance was, and just opened completely new, just horizons and worlds and musical possibilities. Of course, after that, I went and bought every single recording, still on LPs of his, the Schubert one and Beethoven concerto, the Brahms was back in the time before YouTube. So it was LPs, and then it became CDs. So became quite obsessed with him at the time, but was just this extraordinary godlike pianist from America, and here was a little girl in Melbourne, Australia, on the other side of the world. And then maybe 8 years after that, I found myself on the fourth floor outside of the room 413. I think Kitty, I'm sure everybody remembers Kitty, the secretary who brought me up to that fourth floor, left me there outside the room with my knees trembling and shaking. And I was about to audition for Fleischer, actually playing the Ravel left-hand concerto for him, which was such an incredible, I wouldn't say full circle, because it was just the beginning of the circle, but in some way it was kind of a beautiful semicircle that closed at that time. So that's a very, very special memory, quite a sentimental one for me. And perhaps the other little thing to share is that also one of the most maybe precious moments that I've had with him, actually, when he really let me see some of his vulnerability. It wasn't often that he let his students into his innermost private world. And those moments when he did let you see that vulnerable side of him were the moments when it completely just broke your heart open. And I remember he played, I think it was Beethoven Emperor Concerto with the Baltimore Symphony. It was maybe 2002. It was before his Carnegie Hall comeback. And it was just an extraordinary performance and big standing ovation. And and then I came to him after the concert, and I found him, and I was raving about how wonderful the performance was and how moving it was, and how incredible it was to see him perform with two hands. And he looked quite pensive and quite kind of sort of inward focused. And he said, you know what? But I also really want to be able to enjoy myself on stage. And he said that was such a difficult experience performing that piece up there. And it was incredible, just seeing those rare glimpses of his vulnerability and being allowed kind of so close into his world. And for me, was one of those really, really precious, cherished, profoundly moving moments. Yeah, so I don't want to take too much time. And speaking of profound and deeply moving, there's a poem that when you're grieving and when you're grappling with loss or difficult emotions. For me, at least, poetry is always a place of real solace and real salve. And there's a
Yes,
poem that
definitely.
Yes, and there's a poem that I've been going to, again and again during this last 10 days since that Sunday, or for me it was Monday, since I'm ahead of you, almost a day ahead. Yes, when we found out. And I think this poem just so beautifully speaks to what Fleischer is, where we are at, where I'm at right now. So I'll read it to you, perhaps as another little offering. It's a poem by William Stafford, also an American poet, quite contemporary. I think he passed away very recently. One of the most profound, I think, thinkers of our time. And the poem is called The Way It Is. And he says, there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. And for me, and I think probably I speak for all of us, that thread that we all hold on to is our kind of meaning-making thread in life that comes from what we experienced, what we learned, what we got, this incredible gift that we got from him, and I guess the connections that we have with each other now. And thank you so much to you, Anna, who's facilitated this connection. I've seen people I haven't seen in 15 years, so it's truly incredible, a true thread to hold on to, through tragedies and through death and through loss. And so, yes, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity.
And thank you for talking about the thread, which I can, the poem says others can't see it, but I can see the thread which is connecting Leon Fleischer's student. And we have a message from Kitty Allen. Look on the screen. She's watching you. And that's another sign of the thread.
Welling up with tears. Kitty, oh my goodness, I don't want to embarrass myself and start crying here. But at this time of the night, we're heading to 1:30 a.m. Yes, feeling quite...
Isn't it wonderful to see how that thread connects people for real? It's not an invisible one. It's very visible one. And it's the one which we all can feel very strongly. And thank you for your wonderful presentation and for reminding us to hold on what's important.
Yeah, and I guess the other solace, I think, for all of us, and like you keep emphasizing, is that a life and a mind like Fleischer's endures way, way, way beyond the physical passing from this earth to the next realm, and that he's going to continue to live through our hearts and our minds and our imaginations. And so once again, huge thank you to you. It's just been so meaningful to be part of this last week with you and with everyone. Thank you, and
thank you again for being with us. And we will be moving on to our next presenter. Please welcome on our virtual stage Enrique Graf, a fabulous pianist, musician, artist. We're honored to have you with us. Thank you so much for the effort and for dedication and for joining.
Hi.
Hello again.
Hi.
Thank you for this wonderful offering of Beethoven. This was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming online with us. And um,
I appreciate so much what you're doing and your crew also that hasn't been acknowledged, but I know how they're great and they work so hard. This is wonderful. It's great to see old friends and new people. I'm one of the old ones, you know. With Jane Coop, we were talking about. She was talking about how when we met Leon, he was wearing a ponytail. It's funny the day when I when
during the ponytail times.
yes, and motorcycle and all that. Um, I came from Uruguay when I was 18, and um, first time in the United States, I stayed a few days in New York before I came to Baltimore, and first thing I did was buy his recordings. And you know, I totally freaked out because I did not expect, I didn't know about Leon Fleischer. I mean, I knew his name, but um, actually it was Evelyn Swarthout Hayes, a wonderful pianist that used to teach at American University, that came to judge a competition in Uruguay. And she heard me play and she asked me for a recording and she gave it to Leon, and that's how it worked out. So I listened to his recordings, and you know, I literally got sick. I, w- I was throwing up for like about a year. I mean, I got this really crazy, nervous thing because I just felt like I didn't belong. I thought every student of his would be better than me, and I was a freshman, and in my group, that was the first year that he started teaching in groups, and my lesson mates were Julie Bees and Peter Amstutz, who were master students, and so I was completely in awe and nervous. I just felt as nervous as when I used to play for Leon Fleischer. it's, it's
Yes, isn't it the
you know
feeling?
you know
I've
that
played.
feeling, yeah.
Oh, I know that feeling. I've played for tribute for my teacher, and that was probably one of the most nervous performances ever in my life. I
Yeah,
came to the piano to start playing, and I saw my hands trembling,
right,
and that didn't happen to me in years.
right. Much easier to play in public for an audience you don't know. Yeah. And here
Yes.
we have a lot of pianists listening, so it's a tough crowd. But
We have a lot of people listening who love and appreciate, and my feeling is this offering of tremendous musicians who Leon Fleischer nurtured um, cannot be judged. This is an
yeah,
offering from the pure heart.
right. You know, let me finish the story. So I heard the recordings. I thought, wow, what an amazing pianist. And when I went to meet, I met him at the Hayes in Washington before I started studying with him. And somehow I was expecting you know, I don't know, a very serious looking guy with a suit or something like that. That day he was wearing a purple pants, purple shirt, and a red jacket, and with a ponytail. And he was sitting on the floor, and I thought, no, this couldn't be it. You know, I was like, it was totally not the image I had made in my mind from looking at the pictures in the CDs. You know. Anyway, you know, I'm not going to talk about his teaching because everybody else has been so eloquent describing what he gave us. And I just want to tell one funny story about, because Benny Kim, I think, was telling the story yesterday about when he turned his pages. One time, Leon was conducting the Nutcracker, 11 performances of the Nutcracker with the Baltimore Ballet at the Lyric Opera House. And he asked me if I would turn his pages. I was delighted. So on the last performance, in the middle of it, I mean, I get up to turn his page, and he starts telling me. He says, "I have to go to the bathroom. I give you the baton. You continue." and I almost died. I freaked out. I couldn't. I was like, "Is he serious?" But he was. That was his kind of humor. He was joking, obviously. Um, but I have many stories like that. I remember him not just as a teacher, but such a wonderful person, so warm, so like everybody has said, so humble. You hear sometimes about these famous teachers that throw the books around and scream at the students and all of that. I never experienced anything like that. Never saw him. Sometimes when we didn't play well, or somebody else, whatever, he was always respectful, which was really, really, I appreciated that very much. And the last lesson, this is the last thing I'm going to say, when I had my last lesson with him was after I had finished studying that a few months later, I was in it used to be the University of Maryland International Piano Competition, the William Capell became later. And I called him, I asked him if I could play for him something, and so we arranged right after this. He said, well, let's see if you make it past the first round or whatever. So I passed to the finals, and I called him up, and I went that day. We still had 2 days before the finals. And it surprised me very much that he didn't want to hear me. He says, you've played this concerto many times, you know it. He says, let's just talk. Let's talk. So we spent the whole hour talking. He told me about the conductor. It was going to be with the Baltimore Symphony and Sergio Commissiona, whom he knew very well. He recorded with him. And so he told me about some of his different ways of conducting, because Sergio was very difficult to understand. And so by giving me all those tips, I think it helped a lot. I ended up winning that competition, and I felt so good. He gave me so much confidence from not hearing me and not saying anything that, in other words, I felt like he trusted me. And so that was a great thing. Over the years, I've talked to him on the phone. I saw him here in Charleston when he came to play. And I keep him very close to my heart. And I just want to send my regards to his family and to all his students. Everybody has played so beautifully. And this has been a great, great thing. Anna, I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
And I appreciate very much your offering your memories and your sharing your talent, your music, and your wisdom. This has been an incredible experience for me to encounter one Leon Fleisher student after another, and every one of you are artists of your own, and it's just an amazing that thread which connects you all. Great, great pleasure. Thank you so much again. And I just want to mention that we appreciate very much comments from people who are watching. And if we can, we will put them up on the screen for everybody to see. It's just another incredible feel of support from people who are watching and participating in this tribute from the other side of the broadcast. We'll be moving on to our next presenter. Please welcome on our virtual stage, Young Tak. Hello.
Hello.
Very
Hi.
good to see you. And again, thank you for joining.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for making this possible. And hello, everybody. I've been watching this beautiful playing and meaningful talks and very touching talks by everybody for the several days, and I have to say it's just been an experience of its own. It was so special, and personally it's been like a healing experience as we mourn the loss of our dear teacher, Mr. Fleisher. So thank you everybody, and thank you, Anna, for making this happen, and I'm honored to be able to be part of this today.
Yes, Um, would you would you like to talk about some of your special memories first, and then play? Just let us know
Sure,
how.
sure. I can talk a little bit. So you know, I have to say, I mean, Mr. Fleischer touched so many lives of ours, and I have to say he has been one of the most important and um, strongest influences in my life. And I actually realized that more, I have to say, after I left his studio, after I got the teaching position, and all of a sudden I was on my own, trying to figure out everything on the score, trying to teach all the studio of all my students. And then I realized his influence is everywhere as I live my everyday life, as I look at the score, as I teach, as I practice, perform. So yeah, he's been just his presence has been so big on me, and as many of us have commented, many of us know, one of the most striking things when I arrived at his studio was that after I play, whether I was ready or not, in front of Mr. Fleischer, and of course in front of all these great classmates, that are sitting so close to you, and you have to, he would often ask, what are your thoughts? So then I had to articulate. And that to me, at first was stressful, I have to say. But then I realized as I went on, it made me think and, and listen in a way that was much deeper and specific way, and I learned about myself more that way, and it started with that, and of course the lesson was the extension of all that. He would often say, don't play with the generic feelings, so always have the clear intention, have the reasons in your playing, and that really it was just
This is so interesting that you bring this up because in his own reflection in his book and in the interviews, Mr. Fleischer mentions that um, the problem with the hand, which motivated him to turn his attention more to teaching. And in one of the interviews I was watching, he says, well, I had to get away from this easy way of teaching, which is just push the student off the bench and show them this is how you do that. I had to learn how to articulate my intentions. And now you're echoing this exactly same thing. He is teaching the students to be able to articulate through words as well as music. This is
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes, and it's so he would just urge us to have the clear intention, and he would say, you know, what do you want? And so then I would ask, what do I want? And I think that part of the big reasons why I feel like this influence is just all over. Influence, you know, in my life is it's also a big, deep connection to life as I live just everyday life. You know, I think like about myself, what do I want? Who am I? And where do I want to go? So the direction. So in the music, there is also direction. And he will say, well, if you know your goal, where you want to be in music or in score, and also in life, then how do you get there? And it's that how, that process. I talk a lot about this with my students too, because it stayed so deeply, profoundly on me. It's that how, that process, that journey that I had with him, so fortunately, where there was so much learning, realization, so much joy, intensity, sometimes a little pain, but it's just so much meaning that that taught me just so much that I'm so grateful of that journey that I keep on and then try to pass on to my students and share.
And
So,
that is another thing about Leon Fleischer's teaching. He inspired his students to not just focus narrowly on one thing. Every one of his students are great performers, chamber music players, and pedagogues, teachers.
Yeah.
He was teaching how to teach and how to pass on the values and the artistry.
Yes, amazing, amazing teacher. And he once said, it's teacher's job to show students how to look for the materials that help them make choices. And I think it was so true with him. It really stayed with me, that statement that he made. Yeah. And I talked about this specific intention and your ideas, but there was also a lot of freedom, a lot of imagination that he was calling for. The sound that you're making. So how? What kind of sound? Then you have to listen, you have to imagine. And how are you gonna, it's a he would also often say the extension of the keys, your fingers, then it would make different sound. And it was just, I was just fascinated with, his words, his presence. And he would talk about this macro versus micro concepts, right? His lessons, as philosophical as it was, his lessons a lot of times were also specific, right? We talk about, we discuss certain musical ideas. Could be a few measures. A lot of people have already mentioned just this impeccable sense of rhythm, timing, the grouping of the notes, the force, and turning the corner, and the crossing the measures, and to sound, to technique, to universe, to the whole piece, the sound, the concept, and relation to bigger things, life. And to me, that became all like complete, like a one, like a circle. And
That's very interesting.
that's just how I felt. And I realized that more as now on my own, as I teach, as I in front of the keyboard, looking at score, I think about those things. Yeah. And
Wonderful.
every note, being alive, every note meant something. Listening to every note.
And being connected and involved.
And a lot of this I talk to my students about, and I know that many of his students, previous tributes mentioned feeling the responsibility to pass on this to our students, and I think it's so natural, and so it just feels so right. There's, to do that, I feel the same way, and I feel so fortunate to be able to do it. Yeah.
Would you like to play?
Yeah.
Yes, I will give you a moment to put the earphones on. And thank you very much for this wonderful offering. That's just such a soothing and carrying music you're playing. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question, something probably special about this Impromptu by Schubert. We hear several of them during those tributes. Do you have some special memory or some special thoughts? I'm sure you have a large repertoire, but you chose this particular piece.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I've studied this piece with Mr. Fleisher, but this piece came to my mind as I was thinking of what piece I could offer in this tribute. It's, to me, some sweet, precious memories. It just reminisce of those I hear. But then the middle part also has this stormy, the intensity, little pain. And so, and I love this piece. So that's why I chose this piece. And I think of him as I play, and it was just also a healing and meaningful way of just presenting something. So yeah, I saw that there are several people who are presenting this piece. I
Must be we.
yesterday too.
That's right. Must be people feel similarly about the piece and its connection to Mr. Fleischer and the memories in general of being his student.
Yes, yes. So,
Is there something else you would like to share with us?
well, the list goes on, but I just wanted to share some of those important things that stayed with me. And some things that I emphasize to my students, also, he would talk about how to get from note A to B. He would just say that's important to know how do you get from note A to B. It sounds simple, but it's profound. It's you need to put a lot of input to that, a lot of thoughts and questions.
Of course.
Yeah, so figuring out the sound, the way you play, and it's just kind of like the basic things that I think about, even like to begin something, to build something. It's like the foundation there is, yeah. So.
And I find it very, I find it also very interesting that a lot of accomplished artists who studied with Mr. Fleischer at one point or another mention carrying his teaching to their students. I hear just about everyone speaking of the memories of Mr. Fleischer and then making a bridge to how you all teach your own students. I find it that's a very enriching legacy of Mr.
Yes,
Fleischer.
Definitely. I feel so fortunate to have been able to work with him, who gave us such rich tradition, something that we can carry on, something that's so enriching and inspiring, and so big. This force. It was really all about music, and that's what I also carried with me.
Thank you.
Words and so, yeah.
And thank you so much for beautiful thoughts and very soothing playing and very forward-looking thinking. I'm sure everybody is very grateful for your presentation.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for making this possible. It's great to have this community, and it's amazing to see this generation of pianists that I've known, that I have not known, that I've known since I was young, who sometimes actually there's Enrique Graf, he probably don't remember me, but he judged the competition when I entered when I was young student. And so it's that generation to my classmates, to people that I haven't met, probably younger than me. And so it's amazing community. And so,
Yeah, it's an amazing community,
yes.
and Mr. Fleischer's life as a musician spans close to a century. So this is a really big foundation and big tradition. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
We will be moving on to our next presenter of today, and we'll welcome on our virtual stage Jill Lawson. Jill, thank you very much for coming online and sharing your experiences with Mr. Fleischer and your beautiful music.
My pleasure. And for my colleagues and the whole community, of course, it was bound to happen. He was, he was not eternal, even though I believed him to be eternal. Last time I saw him was in Lisbon, where I've been living for the past 15 years. And I also auditioned for the first time in Lisbon for him. And actually, it's a funny story. I approached him after his concert, asking him for an audition. He said yes. He gave me a time the next day. And since I live on the other side of the river, and at that time there was only one bridge connecting the other side and Lisbon, we just barely made it on time. My stepfather was driving, and the traffic was horrendous, and so we just barely made it on time. It was at the Goldberg Foundation, and when we arrived, he looked at us, he looked at me, and he looked at his watch.
I'm so sorry, Jill, to interrupt. Is there any chance you can move a little bit closer to the mic? We can hear you, but it's a little bit soft. We'll give you time. Take your time, please. We can hear everything you say, but yeah, it would be easier to listen. And after that, oh, a lot better. And after that, when you're moving to the piano, please don't rush.
Okay.
We have time to wait.
So what did you hear? What did you not hear?
We heard everything, but it was just soft. So if you segue back a little bit, would be helpful.
Okay. So yeah, the story that one of the stories I wanted to share is when I first auditioned for him in Lisbon. I barely made it on time due to traffic and the horrendous traffic. The only traffic bridge connecting the south side to Lisbon, because I live on the other side of the river. And so when I arrived, he looked at his watch, he looked at me, and he said, "Jill, young lady," or something, "you're 1 hour late." And I was so horrified because I was pretty sure sure that I was on time. But of course, I did not want to contradict him, as he was the master, he was the person, a musician that I respected profoundly. And then after, he said, "Well, I'll listen to you." And I started playing, and then he took all his time. He took an hour, and it was fantastic. So anyways, on hindsight, I'm thinking maybe this was his sense of humor, and I just took it too seriously. So that was the story about my first initial audition for him. Now, I would like to play for him, truly for him. I picked this when I found out that he died. I picked to play Schubert, because Schubert is a composer. When I first came to his studio, I had played very, very little of Schubert. And he thought that that was missing in my repertoire, and that I should absolutely play Schubert. And so he proposed, I think he gave me a choice of 2 sonatas or 3. And I chose this one in D major. We studied it, we went over it quite often, which I think was not so customary for Fleischer, because he liked to pass on to new repertoire, sometimes every other lesson. But we spent quite a bit on this, and it's really thanks to him that today I profoundly love Schubert, and that I feel quite comfortable playing Schubert. So this is for you, Mr. Fleischer.
Thank you very much. And I think we're good. We don't hear the echo from you anymore. Yeah, it would be helpful if you can move closer to the microphone so we can hear you better. And I know I'm repeating myself, but so many memories from Mr. Fleischer and your times when you were studying with him. Of course, they echo other students' memories, but everyone shared something very unique, very special, which was not brought up by someone else. So, as I would like to ask you too, if you'd like to share some memories with us.
Yes. Well, of course, Mr. Fleischer influenced me a lot. But there's something that I really miss a lot and comforted me somehow is his voice. He had the most beautiful, deep, warm voice with a beautiful timbre. I always thought it would be an excellent voice for radio. He was so poised as he spoke and took all his time to find the right words, but also the pauses between the words were so telling. That's one wonderful and it's resonated. That's it. Another thing, one of the phrases or ideas that he conveyed to me was that I should not make the music happen or the sound happen, but I should just reveal it. The sound is already there, as if a negative, the photography, the negative was not yet exposed to the image, but the image was there already. So let it come to you. Don't force it. Just pluck the sound out. So when I came to him, I had a totally a different technique to what he thought that I should learn. The making of sound. My gestures were all downwards, and he tried to work on that. And then he would sit next to me. He would bring his chair and sit next to me at the keyboard and make me put. He would put his arms underneath, and then he would just show me the right gesture, because he thought that the best way to get to me, to find the right sound, would be toward teaching me towards with the gesture, with his gesture. So that's why the markings that I have in the scores are, of course, like all the other former students recalled, with arrows up, pointing arrows, plenty of them. And another thing he used to use in my score, and that I use with my students, which always amused me, is the W of wait. Sometimes you have to wait, and sometimes you always have to support the composer. He would say, support the composer. What did that mean? Is, well, do exactly what the composer asked for. But then he would often ask to elongate notes, long notes, make them longer. And moving notes, making them more, with a direction. So that's something that I did not interiorize immediately. I think that Mr. Fleischer is well, to tell very rawly, a pill with later effect. I don't know that I was very mature at the time to understand, but I recorded it. It came into me, and slowly but surely, it revealed.
That we hear a lot from other students too. It's a thread of a theme which keeps coming back. Several of them. The passing of the tradition to the students, and also the growth of his teaching as it happens as all of us are getting more matured. That is very interesting to hear as a kind of like a red thread. And you can see on the screen that there's a lot of people supporting and sending their love and their comments to you. So we're able to bring them up. And it's also very wonderful to see the community of Fleisher students being so supportive of each other.
It's wonderful.
Jill, if you
Great
wanted
job,
to
Anna.
share, oh, thank you. If you wanted to
Yeah.
share something else, please do. Otherwise, we'll be moving on to our next presenter. This was wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your music and your memories and your gift. We'll be moving on to our next presenter, and we would like to welcome on our virtual stage David Dolan. He's joining us from UK. Welcome, David. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I must tell you that I feel a little bit like as if Harry Potter became a real thing, a real world. Harry Potter is you. And you bring so many people through oceans of times. As it was said, we are talking about people, some of us are less young than others. Me, for example. Which, as you mentioned, as it was mentioned, testifies the fact that the greatness of Fleischer spreads throughout the most part of the century, which is quite amazing. But this situation is really magical, and I want to thank you, and I also want to thank everybody playing, because as it was said in one of the conversations in the group, there are injections of joy, of coming back to this, and it does make a difference. You begin to hear more freshly directions of phrasing, and it's so double thank you.
Well, and thank you for supporting this initiative. It is just so inspiring to see people come in and sharing their homes, opening the doors to their own homes, to their own private settings, and sharing the music so openly as a live performance on internet, which is very new to all of us.
Yes, indeed.
I have a feeling Mr. Fleischer would say, hey, go experiment with it. It's new. Let's see what it's like, right?
I think that's true, yes.
So, would you like to share some memories now and play later, or play first?
I'll share a few thoughts now. As Mika, if I don't pronounce your name correctly, please forgive me and please correct me. Me too, I felt overwhelmed and maybe a bit intimidated, and as Frank Levy said, I also discovered that there wasn't any effort to give validations from Leon. It was all through the music. And things became clear and kind of came together years later, really, and began to yield what I realized with the years I'm so grateful for. What Leon's son, Julian Fleischer, said so beautifully about the connection with real life, with living life. I think we all found it very much a part of what was going on in the lesson. The exaggerate invitation not to be afraid to exaggerate, which had a very strong musical reason and pedagogical reason, came from connecting with the experience of it, connecting with the feeling of it. He said, I found on Opus 90, Beethoven Opus 90, opening a remark from him, it's not enough that you will enjoy what you hear, you have to sensually enjoy it as well. Your body has to love it as well. And looking back, I think that Fleischer was aware of his greatness, and when you entered the room, the 413, it was very clear that you are in the presence of greatness. And despite his struggle with his right hand there wasn't any sign of weakness, quite the opposite of that. I think he knew that he was admired and revered, but there was also an element of humbleness, and I'm talking about the fact that he mentioned Schnabel often when moments of magic, and when many of them came to being in the room. He mentioned Claude Frank and Leonard Schur, two colleagues and friends and people he created with, who were also followers of Schnabel. And that was an important part of, I think, of the phenomenon. I studied with him when I think it was not far from one of the treatment or operations that didn't yield the results he was hoping, which did not affect the quality of the teaching. And looking back now, I find it unbelievable. I find it really amazing. When I'm trying to think of what is it that I really got, what this present contains, I think that Fleischer was, among other things, a master of time, of sculpting with time, and he managed to give structure, the meaning structure that is often a subject of theoretical lectures that don't always connect with living music making. He managed to give it real life through his amazing treatment of time. For example, back to Opus 90, he said about the very first motive, why won't you play it faster? And the second one, the piano, played slower. And I was trying to understand what is he talking about? And I was about to start playing when he said, but don't change the tempo. And he meant it. It wasn't a game of words. It was to do with the way you sculpt the time. So although the overall phenomenon of flow of time is the same, there is a forward and backwards, and the forces between harmonic elements and notes that he was talking about so often. Alon Goldstein speaks so beautifully about it in what he wrote. That all comes together, and I think it gave me the tools to look for what I think Leon did all the time when he played and when he taught: flow, a state of flow while playing. And the constant search, I mean, that was one area where there was zero tolerance to have meaning in what you do. The notion of fake news wasn't, fashionable yet then, but I think that Leon would say about something, a playing where he didn't find that we managed to bring meaning, he would perhaps, I don't know, that's my private association, call it fake news. And one more memory that goes along the lines of what Einav quoted when she spoke about how Leon determined technique, the ability to do what you really want. I heard it from him, and he then said, that was actually Schnabel who said it, that good technique is great only when it becomes an obedient slave of your musical intentions. And all the tools he gave us, for example, he had very specific fingerings he wanted sometimes, which made the playing or phrasing the way he thought was not making sense impossible. And the phrasing, how we understood it, just a very natural outcome. And what was mentioned a lot and was really a part of associations with his teaching, gravity and anti-gravity. Or when he said wait, the word wait did not mean stop. It meant everything except stop. It meant a part of sculpting in time. These are the first thoughts that come to my mind when, you know.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful, beautiful, and also very instrumental for teaching and for playing. This is very tangible advice, which musicians can use for their own growth. This is very enriching. Would you like to play for us?
Yes, and I will play what was beautifully heard just before, the third Impromptu Opus 90, which is, I think, the piece that made Leon deciding that he will take me when I auditioned for him. I brought also the Appassionata and the Jeu d'eau, which were, I think, full of good intentions. So I have a feeling that that's when he decided that let's go. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This was incredible. And if I may comment, this is again the Schubert Impromptu, which we heard several times throughout these presentations. And to me, what is very remarkable is that every one of those presentations sounds extremely convincing. Yet everyone is so different. The choice of tempos, the choice of phrasing, the choice of accentuation, expression overall is very different under the fingers of each different artist. And I find that a tremendous tribute to Mr. Fleischer's teaching.
Absolutely, absolutely, because as Yael Vai said so rightly and beautifully, probably many of the markings on our scores worldwide are very similar. And maybe some feedbacks were very similar, but we play differently. And I don't think he objected that at all. On the contrary, as long as it had a meaning and it made sense, as long as it made justice to the work or to the
Exactly.
lines and the structure of the work.
Mr. Fleischer didn't just proclaim, look for what you want. He followed through with every detail of his teaching. And we're hearing some sound. Is that coming from you? That's okay. The phones are meant to disrupt our life. That's quite all right. And
I apologize.
no problem at all. And in our preparation for these presentations, you mentioned something very interesting of your own work. And that was an improvisation, I believe.
Yes.
Would you please comment on that a little bit?
Yes, and again, very much linked to what I got from Fleischer, which I mentioned before, the making yourself really at home in structure, and both when it comes to tonal environment and outside tonal environment. And I was very fascinated. It was a bug that I'm carrying from many decades about the tradition of improvisation that used to be a natural part of music making up until the late 19th century. And Leon is, of course, a master also of contemporary music, but a lot of his greatness is to do with the repertoire from Baroque era to the late Romantics, where improvisation was about, or extemporization. I think that the British term is beautifully right, to exteriorize in real time what you create. And yes, we at the Guildhall we have a extensive course cross-departmentally. We not only with pianists, although for pianists throughout the second year is compulsory, but it includes all instrumentalists from all departments and singers. And the first year is actually a honeymoon, and the real thing begins after that. But I thought I would just share a very, very simple one of the first steps of taking in harmonic structure, and I am thinking now to demonstrate it on the beginning of the prelude in C minor, Book 1 from the Well-Tempered Clavier, and then reopening it in a way that will never ever be, of course, anything near Bach, which is not the purpose of the game, but the idea is to begin to feel intimately at home, as I said, within this harmonic structure as a business of movement. And that again is something that I think comes from Fleischer's, one of Fleischer's strength and basic elements of his approach. So if we, how shall we do it?
That would be wonderful if you would demonstrate. Totally okay if you want to take off the earphones.
Okay.
I know they're on the way.
Okay, so if we think of etc., and we dive inside to what happens when you reduce it harmonically, what comes out could be this. presto, which you can think of as a grandfather of a later to become cadenza. But let's look at that part of the prelude. If you then open it, and I will now, it makes me think of another wonderful quotation of Fleischer. He said once apropos similar conversation, he quoted Goethe, who said, architecture is music, it's frozen music. Well, if you go the other way around and you begin to melt the frozen architecture, it can begin to create, through voice leading lines that are, to begin with, following exactly the same harmonic structure. For example, either now or and you launch another pressure if you want to follow the same spirit of this prelude. And the next step, of course, would be that you keep the overall harmonic structure logic. So you start with establishing the tonic always, you modulate diatonically, you then modulate chromatically through the dominant pedal, coming back home directly or indirectly, but not following step by step is harmonic progression. So that's one example of a way of working that really follows what I got from Leon when it comes to taking in the harmonic structure as a living thing, as a breathing and beating. And that's, I think, where the hypermeasure notion that he, quoting Schnabel, used a lot. So, for example, at the beginning, I take it as a, one hypermeasure of 4 beats. And then a hypermeasure of 2. So 3 of them, and now it's a 3, etc. So we won't take too much time from that. But that is something that I know I came to being able to look for and develop in many ways thanks to this gift I got from Leon Fleischer and Claude Frank. In brackets I would say that studying with Claude Frank was with Leon's blessing and vice versa. That's another amazing side of the openness and generosity. It wasn't evident at all that Fleischer would be welcoming this idea.
This is amazing to watch you improvise based on the harmonic structure which Bach laid out. And this is just such a phenomenal illustration of taking the structure as the guidance and not maybe necessarily a restricting rule, but as a inspiring guidance and expressing yourself freely within that structure and creating your own. I personally believe that was probably the foundation of Bach's own preludes and improvisations, and many others, maybe even going to our times, jazz musicians use the same approach. It's a very natural approach, and it takes a lot of understanding and learning, and it's so wonderful how Mr. Fleischer was teaching to open up to that and maybe not be afraid of learning something that risky as an improvisation, which you just demonstrated. I'm at awe that you can just sit down and do that. I'm going to try it. But not on the stream. I'm not going to try it on the stream. I'm going to close the doors and just do it by myself. It just feels too risky.
One thing that Julian said is a principle you have to apply. He said, apropos his father approach, maybe it's not kosher, but it's okay. I'm sure that, priests of strict, not free, but strict confines would rightly come with many, reasons to send me to prison for 20 years. and the idea is to balance between the macro and the local motifs, the direction forwards. And that, again, I'm mentioning this element because of, I think, that being a part of what Fleischer gave us to be able to do that in real time.
This is incredible. And you're the example of how that can be done. A lot of classical performing artists and pianists in particular are not venturing in that area, and it seems like it is possible. You just did, and it is possible.
It fell into deep coma for about 100 and something years. Robert Lewin is, of course, a great champion of coming to understanding and reviving that in performance. But it was considered, when you said classical improvisation, it was either a typo, an oxymoron, a mistake, or a very bad taste joke.
But that's wonderful how you point out that Mr. Fleischer was inspiring the students to look at the harmonic structure and take it as the canvas on which to draw their own picture, their own wishes, what they truly want.
Yeah, he didn't, I at least don't have a memory of working with him on improvisation per se, but it doesn't matter because he improvised without changing a single note. The way he plays, Brahms first of course, but everything he plays, that's freedom within structure. And the freedom within structure is, the element I was mentioning, and his little demonstration, one of the first steps in this journey, goes along these lines.
And of course, there is a lot of improvisation in the interpretation of the piece itself.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this very, very interesting and enriching angle to Mr. Fleischer's teaching and your experience with him, and how beautifully and how really you opened up that teaching to something as different as classical music improvisation. This is an eye-opening presentation for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know you hear it a lot, but I thank you, Anna, and your team. We don't see, but I know that are there.
They are here.
It's magical. I mean, it's really... I didn't believe that could happen, and you made it happen.
Me neither. I didn't even imagine that it was going to happen in our lifetime. But I'm very grateful for this new way of connecting and making this possible for all of us. This is wonderful. And wonderful to see people supporting and joining this tribute. Thank you for coming along with us all the way from the UK. And at this time, we'll be moving on to our next presenter of today. Please welcome on our virtual stage, Lori Kaufman.
Hi.
Lori, hi. So good to see you. And thank you again for joining. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. And what an incredible gift you have given all of us this week. It has been so restorative, and I have learned so much. I wanted to explain to you what was going on back in 1991.
I apologize, Lori, for interrupting. Is there a possibility for you to move a little bit closer to a microphone? We still hear you, but if we hear you a little bit louder, it'll be just a little bit better. Take your time. It's okay. If you can pull up the chair closer to the microphone, that would be great.
And I'll move it back.
Oh, we can hear you great.
Okay, and then I'm gonna just have to move the microphone back is this good now?
It's better, but if you can move a little bit closer still,
Okay.
we will hear you much more clearly.
Okay.
And that way you don't have to strain your voice either.
How is this?
This is
okay?
wonderful.
Great, thank you for your patience. Back in 1991, I was having a lot of trouble trying to decide what I was going to play for my master's recital. And Mr. Fleischer said, play the music that you love. And I looked at him and I said, well, how about the Goldberg variations? And he said, absolutely not. And then he said something so extraordinary. He said, I don't teach Bach well. Now, everyone here, everyone listening knows that that is a preposterous statement. You know, Mr. Fleischer had a handful of Bach pieces that he owned. If you heard him play the Chromatic Fantasy or the slow movement of the Italian Concerto, you really felt like you were watching maybe Moses coming down the mountain and saying, I just had a conversation with God and this is what we talked about. Such was the unbelievable, profound nature of his Bach playing and his understanding of Bach. And I was astonished by this comment, and I just had to chalk it up to he wasn't interested for whatever reason, and I had to sort of lick my wounds and move on. But what ended up happening was that a couple of weeks later, I came in for my lesson to room 413, and I plopped this score down on the music stand, and I gave him a very pointed look. And I sat down and I started playing the beginning of the Goldberg variations, and he grumbled a little bit. But I ended up working with him for several lessons, as it's very long and cannot abide by the one lesson rule, with one lesson, one piece rule that he had. And we worked through the variations, and I did end up playing them for my master's recital along with Beethoven Opus 126 as an opener. So it was really a bath in G major, as somebody so beautifully said earlier this week. But what I wanted to tell you about this story is that a couple of weeks into this project of working through the Goldberg variations with Mr. Fleischer, I was walking down the street in front of Peabody, and I noticed across the street there was Mr. Fleischer walking in, we were walking in different directions on the other side and opposite sides of the street. Now, at the time, if one noticed Mr. Fleischer sitting in the courtyard of Peabody, one did not have the practice of walking over to Mr. Fleischer and shooting the breeze with Mr. Fleischer. When I left Peabody, I was very lucky. I kind of followed him around for a while in Europe and wherever he was, and I wouldn't say we became, friends, but I'm very, very grateful for the time that I got to spend. I wouldn't say with him, but near him. The time that I have so many beautiful, beautiful memories of time that we spent outside of the studio and also studying. I took lessons with him whenever I could, but when I was at Peabody, it was very much the relationship of frightened student and revered master, and we just didn't, we didn't go over to him, and we kind of had a sense that he deserved to be treated as normal and have his, have a life outside of, us people always bothering him. So there was no question that I was going to cross the street on this day and give my salutations to Mr. Fleischer and ask him how his drive-in or his trip to the gym was that morning. And I just put my head down and kept walking. And to my great astonishment, I noticed him giving me a very fixed look, as he was, wont to do. And he quickly looked back and forth on both sides and started crossing the street in the middle of the block and made a beeline for me. And I got very, very nervous. And I thought, what did I do wrong? Is he firing me? Does he even know who I am? What's happening? And he came right over to me, and I stopped, and he said, Lori, I cannot tell you how much I am enjoying working through the variations with you. Now, don't get me wrong, I did not interpret this in any way as a compliment to my playing or some sort of positive reinforcement on what I was bringing to the table. But why this moment was so meaningful to me was because Mr. Fleischer didn't share. We didn't know what he was thinking. He didn't wear his emotions. We knew what he thought about, like, what his musical concepts were. We knew who his gods were. We knew what his ideals were, but we didn't always know what his feelings were. He didn't think that was relevant. But on that very day, he felt that it was relevant, and he felt that it was important and necessary to share his feelings with me and to share that he felt joy. He felt joy about something. And the incredible gifts that he gave us, the incredible generosity that we felt like we were showered with just generosity and knowledge and just this valuable, the gold, the liquid gold. And the fact that there were a few moments where he was actually enjoying it too, and he felt it necessary to share that, made this piece a very, very special piece in my mind because of the discoveries that we made together in the process that we went through together on it. So I am going to play just the introduction of it, just the aria, and I need to move the microphone, and sorry. I think this is where it was. And I'm going to do this.
Oh, this is such a wonderful offering of Bach's music. And thank you very much for choosing and bringing this piece. If I would like to ask you, you played with the repeats, which is in the modern performance style. Sometimes people tend to omit the repeats, especially in this particular piece, which takes about 30 minutes to play through without any repeats. And then in the repeats, there are no marked variations. Bach did not provide a different way of playing it second time. Why did you, if you can just share maybe some thoughts?
Sure. I originally, I had the idea to play this piece today, and originally I wanted to play it with the repeats to make it something, a little bit more substantial. And then I thought, Lori, you can't play the repeats because I normally do so much ornamentation when I play Bach, and I do so much ornamentation on on the repeats of this piece, and I could just hear our teacher's voice coming from beyond saying, is that all really necessary? And David Dolan spoke so beautifully about improvisation, and I also worked with Robert Lewin, and I love adding ornaments in Bach and in Mozart and even in Beethoven. And I know that Mr. Fleischer really just wanted the composer's words, the composer's notes to speak for themselves. And I thought, what would happen if I just, as an homage to our teacher, if I just let that happen, if I just decided to let the notes speak for themselves, and any sort of added nuance that I would do to play it differently would be things I learned from him, like with timing and with, bringing out those amazing tenor voices that he loved so much. And it was unusual for me to play it that way, but I felt like this was how I wanted to honor him.
This is very interesting. You bring up the tenor voice. I saw in our almost 100 people messenger chat, someone posted a page. Oh, that was your page.
Me, yeah. Kevin played the second barcarolle of Ned Rorem, and I discovered these barcarolles when I was a student at Peabody, and one day I was in the library, and the music library, and as we used to do, this is like, today's generation doesn't know anything about this, but we would go through the albums, go through records, and try to find like interesting, things. And I was astonished to find a record of Leon playing these barcarolles, and I thought, wow, I didn't know that he had this whole relationship in Paris with Ned Rorem, and crazy stories. So I ended up studying it with him, and Kevin had mentioned that he never had the chance to study it with him, so I I was away last week, and as soon as I came home, the first thing I did was I ran to my bookcase to pull out the music, because I thought, well, maybe he wrote something in that I could, share with Kevin, or maybe there was something he said to me, and the only thing I found was that one bracket, with a thick pencil that he would use, a pencil that's never been sharpened in 50 years. This thick bracket right at the in the second phrase, outlining the tenor voice, and he wrote espressivo, which was so unusual that he would write out a whole word, and now it's my, on my cover page of my Facebook profile.
I saw he really meant it. It looks like the pencil was pressed into the paper,
Right, like it was
rather
like pressed
hard.
it was like pressed into our soul. Like he felt like, I need to impress this upon your soul so that you never forget. And we have these like imprints of his ideas and his, where the phrase would go. And I know a number of people put Beethoven 109, the waltz variation, and people were posting that also. So it's been so incredible just to share that with everyone. It's just been such a gift. It's been so beautiful.
It is extraordinary journey, so beautiful, and everybody brings such a special memories, and they're not all the same, but they're all about the same great man, who was your wonderful teacher. And Lori, if you have some other comments or anything you would like to say.
I mean, I could tell, if we have time, I could tell another story about his great humility. And I wanted to allude to something that Frank Levy said a few days ago, where he talked about bringing in bunte Blätter and how it's always a good idea to bring in something that maybe Mr. Fleischer doesn't know. But the other side of the coin was that we only got to have one lesson on each piece with him, which was always like amazing. But if you could have the opportunity to have a second lesson, then wow, then that is the greatest lesson of your life. And I was very lucky that I was able to have actually 3 lessons on Beethoven 4. And the first lesson was amazing, and the second lesson I was playing it somewhere, and I just asked him if he'd be willing to teach me. And I think it was outside of school time. It was outside of the regular calendar scholar year. And I said, I can pay you for a private lesson fee. And, he was like, save your money, So we had that second lesson on Beethoven 4. That was just because that's when like all the Innigkeit, like all the secrets come out. And there was another opportunity. We were in Germany, and I got to have another lesson with him. We were at a music festival, and he was playing Prokofiev left-hand concerto with the orchestra, and I was going to play Beethoven 4. And so I got to have another lesson with him, which was great. And then I was thinking, like, is he even going to come to why would he even come to my performance of this here? Like, he's not going to come. And I got to the hall, and I saw him sort of ambling around backstage, and he said, they gave me a seat in the front row in the center, and I don't want to do that to you. He didn't want me to walk out on stage and have to play that G major chord, and the first face I see is Leon Fleischer, the person who owns this piece. So he said, I'm going to sit backstage. And I thought it was so touching. And but I had to walk by him in order to go on stage. And I came out and I saw him there. He took up like a whole, like 12 feet space. He was always like, took up a big, he had a very big presence. And he was sort of there, and he looked at me as I was walking to the piano, walking on stage, and he said, gave me a very pointed look, and he said, merde, as though I felt like he was trying to impart his mojo, his G major mojo, sort of give me a little bit of that before I had to play this piece in his presence. So,
What an amazing experience. This is quite a story. Thank you so much for sharing this and for being with us, and for giving this wonderful offering of Bach's music and your understanding of your teacher. This is an incredible, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to just express my condolences to Leon's many children, and especially to Kathy. You know, we owe Kathy a great deal. I am sure that it is due to her that we were able to have Leon for the many, many years that we did. So thank you so much to Kathy.
And thank you again for connecting and for being with us today. We'll be moving on to our last presenter of today. Please welcome on our virtual stage, Michael Lewin. Michael, it's an honor to have you. The stage is yours. Thank you very much for your presentation. I will leave it up to you for what you wanted to say.
You know, this is, can you hear me okay? Anna, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay, great. You know, I think that Leon's death would have been I don't know, a cataclysmic event for me, for everybody, at any time. I think that experiencing it during this COVID-19, when we're all sort of locked in our homes and our lives and activities, our busyness is all put on hold, and I think he's just colliding around all of our heads so much. I've been very moved by hearing. I'm going to be different from everybody else who has participated in this, because I was not Leon's student at Peabody or Curtis or the Royal Academy or any school. I want to tell first the story of how I met him. I've been back and forth as to how extensively or what kind of detail to go into, but we met in France, in Toulouse, at a music festival, and the woman who was running, I was 25, the woman who was running, this is sort of a story of two girls, two women. The woman who was running this festival was a very wealthy patron of the arts, a Fleischer acolyte, and anyway, she was quite obsessed with me, and I didn't want to go to this festival because of her until I found out that Fleischer would be there. And then, of course, I went. He'd been my hero, and I'd always sort of regretted that I'd gone the Juilliard route and not gone to him. But we went, and we were together for 5 days there. He was incredibly relaxed and happy. He got to speak French. He'd lived in France and Europe, and he loved the whole being there. He didn't really have very much to do. He was there sort of to be amuse grise, you know, and we were living actually next door to one another in this luxurious chateau. And morning, noon, and night, I just shadowed him and talked to him. I just wanted to hear his stories. What do you think of this piece? Who did you like conducting for this piece? What is your favorite this? How do you handle this? I just was peppering him nonstop, but he seemed to be very happy, sort of paternal about my idol worship. He was very amused by the situation with this woman. And there was simultaneously a situation with another girl in New York where I was living. And I was also trying to extricate myself from that relationship. And he related very much to these romance troubles. He loved to tell me stories about when he was younger and he was quote unquote girl crazy, and how many troubles he got with this one and that one, and how it was, you know, not good for his career, and, you know, I should get rid of all of them, and, you know, whatever. And which I did eventually. But the sort of the part of the story that I hesitated to tell is that was the girl in New York sent photos, beautiful 8x10 photos. She was a model. They were professional photos, and she was, how shall I say, not wearing really any clothing. And the other people at this festival got super excited when I received these photos and showed them to them, and I apologize for telling this story. Anyway, I hadn't played for Leon. I just talked to him. He'd heard a recital that I'd played in, and we'd talked about it a little bit. I was completely under his thrall. I just, no matter what happened in my life, I needed to work with him. I understood that. He was what I needed. And anyway, I don't remember how this happened exactly, but I don't think I did it. I think somebody else did it, but I played for him in a public masterclass with an audience, and I played the Appassionata of Beethoven, and somebody put one of these risque photos in the music. It was, Henley, Beethoven sonatas, you turn the page. He was sitting there with a music stand, turning the pages, and when he got to a certain page, there was this picture. And of course he knew what it was because he'd heard everybody talking about it. And he did not make all that I saw from him, I was watching him like a hawk to see what would happen. Of course, I feel so horrible about this entire escapade. His eyebrow went up very high, and we all knew his eyebrows were extremely expressive, and he wanted us to even use them in our music making, but his eyebrow went up to, I swear, his top of his head, but nothing. And so he started talking to me about the Beethoven. I don't remember that much about what he said at that first lesson. A lot about rhythm, of course, and such. But he made a lot of double entendres. He talked about this has to be very sensual. Here you need to use the flesh of your finger. Here, things like this. And okay, so we managed to get off stage, and I thought, I don't know, this may be like the end of my dream of working with him. I don't know, I didn't know. And the most amazing thing, actually, about the entire thing is that he never said a word to me about it. Everybody was coming, what did he say? What did he do? Nothing. He did nothing. Of course, later I learned one of his favorite words was nothingness. And I thought this was the ultimate example of nothingness. I don't know what he thought about it. I think he thought it was funny. He certainly wasn't offended, thank God. But he never said a word to me. I don't know whether when my name came up over these many years, whether he said, I'd like to tell you a story. I don't know. But anyway, so now that I've gotten that story out of the way, I did not want to go back to school. I did not want an artist's diploma or a doctorate. I was starting to play concerts and such, and somehow he gave me the most unbelievable gift of time. He said, we can have private lessons. So for 2.5 or 3 years, approximately every other week. I mean, sometimes it was every 3 weeks or something. I mean, of course, he was so busy. And now that I am so busy, I can't, it just means, I just look back and I think it's so amazing that he gave me so much time, and I only know one other person. There may be more, but I know Yefim Bronfman had similar experience. But in any case, I would take the train, the Metroliner from New York to Baltimore, and have 2 hours with him, and take the train back. And, I had this book. I decided I would read War and Peace, because, the thing is, it's like 1,600 pages in infinitesimal print. And I thought, what's better than to read this every couple of weeks, going back and forth to Baltimore on the train. I'm not sure I ever got through it. On the way to Baltimore, I was always studying the score. And on the way back, I would just write all over the book. I would write things that he said, these Fleischerisms. Many of them have been said by many people. There are a few that I haven't heard that. Some were very funny. You know, I once played the Scriabin Sonata Fantasy for him, and the left hand. And he said, "It's like Pac-Man." And I just thought it was so hysterical that he knew who Pac-Man is, or was, I don't know, and Pac-Man. And I've told this story to every student I've ever taught the Scriabin Sonata to, and none of them seem to think it's funny, but I don't know, I think it's very funny. He talked about angel babble. Angel babble. It's just so perfect, you know? I remember the first time I was playing Clementi F sharp minor sonata, and there was something he said, you know, it's angel babble. And how can you listen to the last movement of 111 or parts of 109 variations or all sorts of music without thinking about angel babble? I don't know, so many things here. It's just such a mess, this book. I got all upset because I suddenly thought I'd misplaced it, and I tore the house apart to find it. I played a lot of music for him. I played, you know, pretty much every lesson I brought another piece, sometimes not. The first thing I ever played was the Schumann Fantasy, and I was just so, so much, you know, and I said to him, "Leon, may I bring this back next time?" And he said, "Yes, I don't know why students never bring back a piece the second time." Well, I don't know, maybe he told them not to. I don't know. I mean, you know, what was such a miracle, what he gave me was, I suppose, was that it was just the two of us, you know, and normally he taught, as you know, in these groups, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, you hear his thoughts on all kinds of repertoire, and you make friends, and I see these friends, you know, lifetime friends, and connecting and reconnecting, and it's beautiful. But I just took the train, you know, I had my time, and I drove back and just tried to learn. And I went through probably a dozen concerti. I was starting to play concerts, so I would play programs I was playing for him, all sorts of repertoire, all kinds of things. The only thing he sort of, even things that he didn't think he'd be receptive to, Rachmaninoff First Concerto, I remember. Prokofiev, I don't know, I remember once I played Prokofiev's Sixth Sonata for him, and he said, you know, really the only reason pianists play Prokofiev is so that they can bang. And I wasn't sure whether he was really saying that I was banging or whether that's how he felt about Prokofiev. And it may be true, of course. Anyway, this was, I don't know what to say. I didn't know anybody. I never met any of the students who were with him at that time, although I think a few of them were actually there at that time. When I did meet Enrique Graf, who had already finished with him, but he was the teaching and the head of the piano prep department at Peabody, and we became friends. I don't remember how we met there, but we've been lifelong friends ever since. And I know many Fleischer students, of course, in the course of professional life and such. But there are no words to describe how much I love him, how grateful I am. You know, I always have said, and it's true, that every day I think of him. Every day he's in me. Because every day all I do is think about music. So how can I not think about Leon? You know, I'd like to say a few things about students. Whenever he met one of my students, he would always put his hand on their head and say, "You are my musical grandchild." And that, of course, just blew them away. And they would all come running back to me and say, Mr. Fleischer called me his musical grandchild. And I would sort of cry because maybe it meant that I was his musical child. I remember once I had a girl, a Russian girl, who came and had gotten her undergraduate degree with me in Boston. And she was a very fine pianist, and I wanted her to go to study with Fleischer at Peabody. And she also auditioned for some famous Russian pianist who teaches at Mannes, who wanted her very much and gave her a full scholarship, and Peabody gave her half scholarship. And maybe 5 years had gone on since I'd last spoken to him at that point. We would see each other in spurts over time. And I called him and he answered, which was a miracle. And I said, Leon, this girl, she came here and she didn't speak any English, and her mother died inside of a week of her getting here, and she has no money, and I've taken care of her for 4 years, and it would mean the world to me if somehow you could help her to make that possible. And he walked down to the dean or financial aid or whoever it was, and he called me back and he said, it's okay, she has a full scholarship. I just appreciated that so much. And there was a period at the Boston Conservatory where we had the great good fortune to have as our president Richard Ortner, who had been a close colleague and friend of Leon's at Tanglewood. And when the whole Tanglewood thing blew up, we were lucky enough to get Richard to be our president. And he was also very close to Fleischer, and he made it possible for us to bring him for master classes and whatnot. And I remember we gave him an honorary doctorate. And we asked him if he would play. And so there was, a lot of very excited kids, not all music students. Some of them were music and theater, musical theater. And I don't remember whether he spoke, but I remember that he sat down at the piano and he played Sheep May Safely Graze, which has been talked about a lot over this last week. And it was unbelievable. Every single person, whether they were, drunk or crazy or excited or they didn't like music or whatever, everyone just stopped. And there was a sense of absolute communal holding of breath and transformation and transporting. And it was an amazing experience to see the power that his music making had over people. So anyway, thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell perhaps a few more humorous or indiscreet stories.
Thank you, Michael, for such a heartfelt sharing, for opening your stories and your heart, and for this is just beautiful. You made me cry. This is incredible.
When I think about him, I cry all the time. I've been crying for a week.
And your beautiful playing and your beautiful stories, I'm sure, made a lot of people emotional.
I just want to say the simplest lesson that he ever told me, which is obvious and we all know it and we all tell our students, don't think about yourself, think about the music when you play. It's sort of the best thing to tell somebody, to not be nervous or not, but it's the hardest lesson. That's the lesson of all of the lessons that I struggle with all the time, and I think many people do. to really just live the music and to take yourself out of the equation. But I will say that the great gift, the unbelievable, incomparable gift of that being a musician affords us is moments when in our playing we transcend reality, we fly, we soar, we're somewhere in his beloved cosmos, we're just making music, you know, and that experience, I don't know how many activities in human endeavor can provide that experience. And that experience is like a drug. You know, that's why you want to perform. You want to have that feeling of just flying unfettered with the music and sharing it with the people and this journey. And what Leon Fleisher gave to so many of us was the tools, a map to make that happen more often, a way to organize this mysterious medium of sound and to let it help us reach the heavens with it.
This is so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for making this hang up in the air with a map to make this more happen more often. And you certainly made it happen today in your presentation, Michael. This was just extraordinarily beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with my technological ineptitudes.
Oh, we're all inept with technology. It's all new to us.
Well, some of you want to learn.
Well, some of us are just taking a risk. You did too.
I'm still trying to figure out the piano, you know.
But thank you so much for being patient and coming online and being so open. And this is very extraordinarily meaningful. Thank you very much for being.
And I send my love to all the students and Leon's family and all those who loved him and mourn him and celebrate him. Thank you.
And I would like to also thank everyone who were staying with us this whole week. We will be announcing more programs with more of Leon Fleischer's fabulous students joining with their beautiful live music and with their very enriching tributes to their great teacher. Please stay in touch and visit the Facebook page Tribute to Leon Fleischer by his students for more announcements to come. With this, we'll be turning again to Mr. Fleischer's own speaking through his own music. And we'll be saying goodbye for now, but not a farewell. So this to be continued.